Welcome to the High Vibe Soul Podcast, a space where we discuss personal growth, spirituality, motherhood, relationships, and shifting old paradigms so that you can live your most authentic, soul-aligned life. I'm your host, Lyndsey, and I founded the High Vibe Soul Company to empower women and support them in becoming their highest, brightest selves. From my light to yours, I am so grateful you're here. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are going to do a solo episode on birth trauma. Now, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I've experienced birth trauma twice, I've experienced postpartum trauma twice, and I've also worked as a postpartum doula, which you may or may not know. So I've seen a lot of different experiences with women and how they go through it and how they've moved through it. This topic just came up again recently for me, actually at a birthday party. Shout out to the preschool moms, if you're listening. There was a group of 5 of us, and we all have children that were there that were 4 or 5 years old. And somehow we get on this topic of birth trauma. And it was incredible. Every single woman in this circle has experienced some form of birth or postpartum trauma. I had to Google afterwards, like, how common is this? How many women are experiencing birth trauma? On Google, it says the estimate is 40 to 45% of mothers. But I would argue when you throw in postpartum trauma, if you've had more than one child, more often than not, you've experienced something, whether it's trauma with a little t or trauma with a big T. And how often are we actually reporting this to our providers? Because I know I didn't. So I would estimate it's probably closer to 3/4, I don't know, maybe even more of mothers that end up experiencing some form of birth or postpartum trauma. It can be trauma with a little t. Could be the experience just doesn't go as planned and you're really disappointed. It could be that the care that you receive in the hospital or birth center is really poor. It could be trauma with big T. Trauma with a big T is everything from birth complications, injury, emergency C-section, you or the baby needing immediate medical care after. But really, I feel like it's so subjective. So don't listen to me to tell you what was a big trauma or a little trauma for you, because every person's experience is so different. But we're going to talk about how trauma unlocks over time in layers and stages. And this is something that took me a long time to understand because it took me so many years to integrate my first experience. But then going through it a second time, I was able to move through it so much more quickly. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how I move through each of my experiences. And I'm also going to share what happened for me. Let's first talk about how trauma unlocks over time in stages. So the first stage, and again, this is my research, but also my experience, my opinion. The first stage is shock. It's like, did that really just happen? Was that a nightmare? It's really confusing. And then immediately after that, there's sort of a bit of numbing. Just like trying not to think about it, burying it down, trying to distract yourself, maybe even being in denial, like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm just making this out to be a bigger deal than it was. I know I went through that with my little T trauma with Kenzie. The next stage is often anger over the injustice of it all. Like either anger at yourself, I can't believe I let that happen, or I can't believe the hospital handled it this way. I can't believe maybe even my husband didn't advocate for me, what have you. There can be anger. The next stage is often what's called like bargaining or replaying the situation. And it's really a form of distraction. But it's like, well, it could have been worse. It could have been this situation. Or thinking, what if this had happened instead? And going into anxiety and fear mode. The next stage is really the sadness of it all and the grief setting in. For some, it may even be depression. It can manifest as guilt or shame, and this can make you feel really foggy and really out of it. You can have a lot of trouble sleeping. And just, I think for mothers in particular, I think for many of us, it really manifests as guilt and shame. Like, I could have done this differently, even though you couldn't have. That was your experience, and that was the experience you were meant to have. But we blame ourselves, and we just feel sad over it. Especially if, like for me, my big T trauma, that was going to be my last child. And I was so upset. Like, no, that was not how the experience was supposed to go. So there can be a lot of that. And then finally you move through it and you move on to acceptance. And I'm going to be honest with you, this can take years for people to integrate. Like for Hudson, my postpartum trauma with Hudson, I would say that took me, I don't even know, probably 3 or 4 years to fully integrate. It was a very slow process for me. With Kenzie's birth, that was my little T birth trauma. I was still doing some healing around it this year. So that's little T trauma, but she's 4.5. With Coco, I made a point to really work on that healing and bring it to the surface. And I would say I've moved through it at this point. As far as I know, there can always be another layer that comes up when you're least expecting it. But Coco's almost 3. So again, this is a long process. I was still doing some healing around it this year. So that's little T trauma, but she's 4.5. With Coco, I made a point to really work on that healing and bring it to the surface. And I would say I've moved through it at this point. As far as I know, there can always be another layer that comes up when you're least expecting it. But Coco's almost 3. So again, this is a long process.
Hello, beautiful soul. I want to interrupt this episode very quickly to let you know that I have created one of my favorite meditations yet. It is a birth and postpartum trauma healing meditation. This is the exact meditation that I've used many times over to help me heal both Kenzie and Coco's birth traumas and also the postpartum trauma that I experienced with Coco and Hudson, because I had something with every single child. This is something that is so near and dear to my heart, and it's super powerful, yet very gentle. So I will link the meditation in the show notes, or you can go to my website and find it. It's thehighvibesoulco.com. Let me know how your experience goes with it. I would love to hear from you and hear how you healed throughout. Second, I want to let you know that I have another episode specifically dedicated to my postpartum anxiety experience with Hudson. If you feel like diving into that, that is episode 7. Lastly, I will be sprinkling information about healing this type of trauma all throughout the episode, but if you are not quite ready to hear my own personal stories, skip ahead to around 23 minutes or so, and you will get the bulk of all of the ways that I have personally healed my birth and postpartum trauma these last few years.
So I want to first share what I call my little T trauma with Kenzie's birth, who again is almost 5, and how I worked through that. And then I will share Coco's birth and how I worked through that. And that's my big T trauma. And then I want to share some pieces of the puzzle with trauma healing that you may or may not be aware of. I had some huge epiphanies and aha moments about this a few years ago. So Kenzie's birth, it was a wild ride, y'all. I was walking around with Kenzie at 4 centimeters for 3 weeks. Every time I would have my midwife check me, she would go, "Oh my gosh, she's so low." And I would say, "Yeah, I feel like I'm just sitting on her head." It was so uncomfortable. You know those giant exercise balls? My husband would make fun of me because it looked so ridiculous, but I was just sitting on the exercise ball. I couldn't even sit on the couch. And so I had a feeling she was going to come fairly fast, but I had no idea what I was in for. So I went in to see my midwife on the dot, week 39. She checks me. She's like, wow, girl. And I'm like, I know. Is there anything you can do? I've heard about this thing called a membrane sweep. And she goes, oh, yeah, you are ready. If I do that, you're going to labor like fast. And I'm like, okay, just do it. I don't care. Do anything. So I had the membrane sweep. Immediately after, I start having, my contractions start as like period cramps. So I start having crampiness. Okay, so I also want to paint the picture for you. This is June 2020. This is very much the height of COVID. So we are in lockdown mode. We're, still distancing 6 feet, the whole ridiculousness of it all, wearing masks, all of it, right? So my fear during all of this was that they're going to take my baby away if I don't follow what the hospital says to do. Okay, so that's in the back of my mind. And it's ridiculous because you are a sovereign being. You get to decide what you want to do. The hospital does not get to decide. Okay, so whether you've had one child or you're going to have another one, I just want to keep this in mind for you, because this is something that I really beat myself up about later. So anyways, going back to the day Kenzie was born, we go to the hospital and we're on the way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I might have this baby in the car. Like, this is getting bad. We get to the hospital and they're slammed, and they're also moving super, super slow because of all the COVID precaution. They finally get me in a room at 5:15. They check my cervix and I'm at 6.5, and I'm in so much pain. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, when can I get my epidural? Because I got it around, I think, 6 or 7 with Hudson. So I don't know what it would be like to go past that point. And she's like, well, it takes about an hour to get all your tests back. This nurse also, she was in a bad mood, which was not helpful for me at all. She was being a little rude. She was clearly ready to get off her shift. Her shift ended at 6, she even told me. So I could tell she was just like ready to get out of there. She wanted nothing to do with us. And so she leaves, and it's just me and my husband, and I'm like bent over, pacing. I'm starting to actually like vocally kind of, not scream, but like make some really loud, like feral noises. And all of a sudden it's 5:45, and I'm seeing this like red digital clock above, and I looked at my husband and I start crying and I go, she's coming. I was like, no, I'm not going to get the epidural. And he's like, yeah, you are. And I'm like, I'm not. She's coming really soon. 5 minutes later, she's literally coming out of me. And so I'm like standing the whole time. Also, as a postpartum doula, I know this is super helpful for birth. Like, the worst way that you can give birth is the way that they have you lay, because it makes your pelvis smaller. So laying on your back with your legs like kind of pulled up next to you, that is the worst way to give birth. So ask to give birth in a different way. Ask them to position you in a different way until the very, very end, because it's going to help the baby move faster. So anyways, I'm like, you got to get somebody. He runs out in the hall. The nurse comes running in. She's like, oh my God. She calls the doctor on call. Not available. Calls the midwife on call. Not available. Calls another doctor. Calls another midwife. Nobody is available. And so she's like, you got to lay down. I'm like, I don't want to lay down. She's like, you have to lay down. This is where I felt like I lost my power. And this is part of my little T trauma. So I lay on my back, even though I don't want to, even though I just want to give birth, like she's coming out, I'm not pushing, and I just want to give birth standing, like kind of bent over. She has me lay down, and she holds Kenzie's head in, and I freak out. I'm like, get your hand off of her head. And she goes, stop pushing. And I looked at her and I go, I am not pushing. My body, I'm getting chills as I'm saying this. I'm like, I am not pushing. My body is doing this. And she's holding her head in. I go, stop holding her head in, because all I can think is, oh my God, my body is pushing Kenzie out, and she's going to have a neck injury. And so the nurse finally stops holding her head in. Thank God. And Kenzie just comes right out. It was incredible. And as she comes out, because I didn't have any pain medication, if you haven't given natural birth, it's the weirdest feeling, because you can feel the umbilical cord too coming out, and it feels like this slippery rope almost. I'll never forget that feeling. And Kevin, my husband, is taking pictures, and we have a picture of them like about to put Kenzie on my chest, and I'm looking at her and I am not in love. I am mad. I am looking at her like, what did you just do to me? I was not prepared for this. Like, I am pissed. It's kind of funny now. And if you know Kenzie, it's extra funny because Kenzie's brain and the way that she like moves from activity to activity, she's quick. So her birth makes total sense. She was born, I remember looking at the clock, 5:55. Now, if you know my love for angel numbers and numerology, fives mean change, freedom, transformation. That's a 5. And so I looked at that and I was like, wow, your birth time means something, by the way. If you've never looked up your birth time in numerology, highly recommend Googling it and seeing what resonates, because your birth time also means something. So, and your birthday, all of it. I'll do a whole episode on numerology, guys. So anyways, I look at the time, 5:55, and I was just like, whoa, this girl is going to be a force. I'm actually like pretty excited right now, but I'm also mad at her because that was the most painful roller coaster I've ever been on. And if you've given birth, you know that your contractions, they come in these waves, right? And you get about a minute break in between. But for that wave, I forget how long it is. I don't know if it's a minute, minute and a half of just the most intense pain you've ever felt in your life. I wasn't breathing. No one was coaching me through it. Like, had I known, I absolutely would have gotten a birth doula, because my husband was just like a deer in the headlights. But it was just so intense and so traumatic that apparently my heart rate was then just going crazy. And the nurses were like, we have to give her something to bring her heart rate down. I was in a bit of shock, and I just couldn't even say like, no, I don't want any medication. And they just did it, and it just happened so quick. So again, another piece where I felt like my power was given away. Oh, and the last piece where I felt like my power was given away, which I didn't even touch on, as I'm giving birth, the nurse calls in this COVID person who's in full like head to toe gear to swab my nose, literally as Kenzie is coming out. And I looked at her, I was like, can you not? And she's like, she said something like, if you don't do this, we're gonna have to do it after, and and basically convinced me to do it. But I was just like, what the hell? Like, I had no choice. Like, I felt so powerless. And that was an awful, awful feeling as I was laying there in the most vulnerable position giving birth. So that is how Kenzie's birth went down. I will say, after Kenzie's birth, after that whole experience, I actually had the most amazing postpartum recovery. I had zero pain. I didn't tear. I had very little of the postpartum SADs. I was kind of almost waiting for postpartum anxiety to hit, just because of the way that things had gone down with Hudson, and nothing. I felt great. I also think it honestly helped being in summer 2020, because I didn't feel like I had all these like obligations or anything I had to get back to. It was a very slow pace of life that summer. And it was just like really nice because my husband was working from home full time. And so I had more help there. And I had an amazing postpartum recovery. My personal opinion, I do feel that the less medication you can receive, and not having that like epidural and all the things, I think that was a huge reason I didn't have postpartum anxiety, because I'm highly sensitive to everything, but especially like medication. And it can make me feel really, really depressed. Like, I remember when I got my wisdom teeth out when I was like 19 or 20, I remember just crying from taking Tylenol with codeine. And my mom being like, okay, I don't think you should be taking this. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I should either. Like, I feel so depressed. So medication's just not good for me. I'm like all natural, holistic, girly. So that was my trauma, Kenzie with a little t. Maybe to some people, they'd be like, no big deal. And it wasn't a huge deal by any means, but it was really interesting because her birth would randomly come up in my mind and my thoughts and my emotions to be released. And like I said, this just came up again recently for me last year. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea I was carrying anything from her birth still. So here's how I moved through that. I moved through it, one, by talking about it. I shared her birth story a lot, whether probably whether people wanted to hear it or not, but it also was a pretty wild birth story. So I shared it a lot. I did a lot of journaling. Journaling moves emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. I journaled about it. I went through that stage that I mentioned earlier, anger. I wrote a letter to the hospital about how mad I was and how unacceptable it was to be COVID swabbed in the middle of birth, and how the nurse tried to hold her head in. And apparently that if you give birth in Atlanta, beware of, you know what hospital I'm talking about. It's the #1 birthing hospital in the country in Sandy Springs. Beware and know how to have somebody advocate for you, because when you're in so much pain or shock even, it's so hard to advocate for yourself. So maybe talk to your husband or your doula about this. But I have heard other stories now of nurses holding the head in, trying to wait for the doctor, and somebody had a really awful birth injury from it. So do not let them do that. And then I also talked to a therapist about it for a little bit. And that was really helpful, just to have that like third party who, talks to other moms about this kind of thing. And that's how I moved through Kenzie's trauma. Now, like I said, I hadn't thought about this for a long time. And it did come out for me out of the blue last year. And I actually just started crying. And I knew that crying is part of releasing emotion, right? But I knew that there were some little bits that still need to be cleared. Like I could feel it. So that day I went into meditation and I did some energy healing around it and I cleared it, which I will explain more about how I do that later on, because this is one of the most important pieces of trauma healing, in my opinion, that nobody talks about. So it just goes to show you that whether it's big T or little t, there can be many layers, and this can take, again, like years to clear. Now let's chat about my story with Coco. So I'm going to do a separate episode on her actual birth story, because her birth story is full of like miracles and signs and synchronicities. And it's actually a really lovely story, minus the trauma part, how it ended. So Coco's birth, I had all these expectations about how it was going to go, how I wanted it to go. Ultimately, it ended after a very, very long day and a half in C-section. I was on so much medication at that point, like epidural medication, whatever they give you for the C-section, all the things, which is not good with my body. And I was so tired because I didn't sleep basically for 2 days. And I was just, so disappointed. I can't even express how disappointed I was to have an unplanned C-section as my final birth. And also, I have taken care of women who have had C-sections as a postpartum doula, but to experience it yourself is something completely different. And I've heard that if you have it planned and you're rested and you're ready to go and you know what to expect, it's not as bad as if you're exhausted after 2 days of labor and it's also unplanned, so you're not mentally prepared. I had my worst, probably darkest postpartum experience with Coco. The anxiety that I experienced was unlike any other. And I also absolutely had postpartum depression because I was crying a lot and even like my body was like shaking. It's really interesting. Like with Hudson, it hit right away. But with Coco, she was born in March. It hit me right after her birth, but it didn't peak until June or July, which was really interesting. So with Coco, I did a complete overhaul of my life. Because one of the first things, if you go to a provider and you tell them you're experiencing postpartum anxiety or depression, they're going to put you on medication, like more often than not. And as someone who is so sensitive to medication, and I know a lot of women who do absolutely need that, of course. I'm not saying don't go there. But for me, I know how sensitive I am, and I was just like, I will try everything before that. Like that is my last choice. So I was determined that I was going to move through my postpartum anxiety and depression and this birth trauma naturally. So I did so by, of course, journaling, my go-to, and sharing with others. Absolutely, therapy. Therapy's huge. But I also had to do a whole overhaul of my life. And I knew that, and I didn't really want to do it, but I knew what I had to do. So one of the ways that I was coping was I would have a glass of wine every night, maybe two, because that was helping me take the edge off. So I quit drinking wine. I quit drinking altogether, which in the summer is kind of tough because, like, who doesn't love a margarita, right? But I knew I needed to stop drinking because it's such a depressant, especially for me. I started researching CBD and I started taking CBD, which if you are a mama who does not take CBD, I don't know how you do it. Like, I don't take it every day, but on the days where, like, my husband's traveling or the kids are super whiny, or if my mind is spinning and I'm having trouble even with meditation and breath work, just like calming my mind, I'll pop a CBD. I love Green Compass CBD. I love them because CBD apparently soaks up everything from the environment it's in. So it can actually be really toxic, which is super scary. And Green Compass tests its soil. It's all organic. It's third-party tested as well. And so you're getting like really, really high quality and you get what you pay for there. So I started taking CBD. This is also when I really started consistently meditating. I knew I had tried to meditate and I had meditated on and off for years, but I didn't fully understand the point of it. I knew I felt better afterwards, and I had some guided meditations that I was like, okay, that was nice. But I never fell in love with meditation until this time period. I made a commitment to meditate every single day, and I made a commitment to myself that I would find the type of meditation that made me excited, that made me want to do it. And so I tried so many different types of guided meditations, and I realized, wait a minute, meditation could be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't just have to be like, oh, I'm trying to clear my thoughts. No, it can be for healing, which is how I primarily used it. You can use it to heal yourself. You can use it to imagine connecting with your future self and becoming that future higher version of yourself. You can use it to heal your past and go back in time in meditation. And this is something that I've done many times now. Go back to that moment of your birth trauma. And you can either imagine that you are there with yourself during that trauma and you're coaching yourself through it, and you're even, hugging yourself and saying, petting your head, it's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay and you're going to be stronger for it. You can use it for affirmations to rewire your subconscious. This is something that I find incredibly potent. If you listen to affirmations either right upon waking or right before bed, this is when your brain is the most malleable and can really soak them in. Affirmations are so underrated. I'm telling you, these are so powerful. And it's not about like bypassing by any means. Of course, you have to do other work with them, but affirmations are really incredibly important. Another piece of this, and if you've never done this, it's super awkward. I started doing mirror work because I realized I was so mad at my body. I was so ashamed that my body didn't do what it was, quote, supposed to do. I would look at my C-section scar and just be like, ugh, I hate it. I hate that little shelf on my stomach. I would cringe, I would shudder. I was just grossed out by it, all the things, right? And so I had to rewire that for myself. I had to find love for my body again. Part of this for me was body connection. So it was doing breath work, which is part of meditation. Part of dropping it into meditation for me is taking these really intentional deep breaths, and you breathe in for say 4 seconds and you want your exhale to be longer, say 6 or 7 seconds. That helps you really drop in for meditation. It puts you into a parasympathetic state. It calms your nervous system when the exhale is longer than the inhale. There can also be more intense breath work that really helps clear all these thoughts and clear your mind. And that's where you breathe in your nose for one exhale and out your nose for one exhale. So sorry, I don't know how this is going to sound on the recording, but if you're watching me on YouTube, you close your mouth and it's belly breaths. It's called Breath of Fire. You can look it up, but you go, that 3 minutes of that is three times 1 minute each. That is just a game changer. It also helps move out energy. So these are the things I started doing. I would also look in the mirror and just say, I love you. I love you. I love you. You did everything you could. That was the experience you were meant to have. This is all for your highest good. That was the experience Coco was meant to have. That's how she wanted to come in. That's how her soul wanted to come in. That was the agreement your souls made. Your soul and her soul. That was the agreement they made for this birth. And there's always a higher reason for it. So I would tell myself things like that. And I would look in the mirror. Sometimes I would laugh at myself because I look so stupid. But I would tell myself that. And I'm telling you, y'all, mirror work is underrated too. In fact, I'm going to start doing some mirror work. I'm going to start recording some mirror work meditations because I feel so strongly about this. I would also just work on looking at my body and hugging my body, holding my body, putting my hand on my heart, touching my body, touching the scar, saying, I love you. And just touching the scar. Just touching the scar can be a process. And especially it feels really painful. It's really important that you work on the scar tissue. And this is something I would tell C-section mamas as a postpartum doula. You want to work on stretching the scar, which doesn't feel great, and massaging the scar to break up the scar tissue as early on as possible. And that helps with that little kind of shelf that you get. So looking at my stomach area and saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. You birthed my baby. I love you. Thank you. Body affirmations. Like I said, yoga, just that like deeper connection with your body. Anything that makes you feel connected to your body. Sometimes I love this workout called Bar 3 because I have it on demand, like virtually. And that one helps me really connect to my body and my breath as well. So anything that connects you to your body. But another piece of this that I realized last year, so this was year 2, was that your body stores trauma and emotion for longer than maybe your mind, or maybe longer than your mind would like to believe. I actually had breast implants, and I had been getting this kind of intuitive message that I needed to get them taken out. And I knew that, but I wanted to wait until after Coco's birth. I was like, I want to wait till like a year after and be done with nursing and all the things. So at the end of my first year with Coco, like around when she was almost 2, I got my breast implants out. I asked my surgeon, hey, is there a way that I can have this scar worked on? Because it was kind of looking not how I would like it to look, kind of puffy. And she said, oh yes, I have this woman. She does something called lymphatic cupping. She also does lymphatic massage and other therapies. And she will take this little cup and she'll basically suction cup it onto your scar and then like twirl it around in a circle and different movements. And she will break up the scar tissue. The sooner the better. And I said, okay, great. So I went there for my explant scars. But when I went there, I was like, wait a minute. Can you look at my C-section scar? I'm about 2 years out, but it's still pretty raised and it's really hard. It feels really deep. Is there anything you can do? She's like, yeah, of course. She put her little lymphatic cupping on my scar and she touched it and she goes, ooh, your scar feels angry. And I was like, really? I feel like I've pretty much worked through the trauma. But in my head, I was like, wait, I don't think I have worked through all this trauma. There's more. I know there's another layer. So she worked on the scar. I got in my car afterwards. I was bawling my eyes out the entire ride home. Just crying and crying about the birth. Like just all these memories were coming up about the birth. And it was like, it's so clear. And I know this, but it was so clear then how true it is that your body stores emotions and trauma. And you have to work on the physical piece as well as the mental and emotional piece. And I'm going to also touch on the energetic piece. So there's 4 pieces. So I was bawling my eyes out. After that, I ended up scheduling, it's called a craniosacral therapy session with her. So this is something that is incredible for anyone that's experienced trauma. She would hold my body. It was so relaxing. It was almost like acupressure, but she would hold my body with her thumbs and her hands at different pressure points. And it just created this sense of like safety. It helps move out emotion and trauma. It was just so lovely. I might have even fallen asleep. So I highly recommend that as well. Something that I did not do, but I know has become really popular and is also really important, is somatic therapy. So if you are still moving through birth trauma or any sort of PTSD, work with a somatic therapist. They use all different types of tools to help you mentally, but also your body physically to move through trauma. And then the last piece of moving through birth trauma that has helped me just as much, if not honestly more than these other pieces I've talked about, is energy healing. And this is a piece that is rarely touched on, and it needs to be spoken about. You don't have to be an energy healer to do this. You can go back in meditation and go back to that time. You can envision being with yourself at that time. You can also envision being yourself at that time and imagine just sending yourself like love and compassion and just softening the whole situation in that way. Of course, I'm an energy healer, and so I do energy clearing on my whole body. I mean, I do energy clearing on myself, like, depending on the week, like 1 to 3 times a week usually. But I would specifically go into meditation and do energy healing on the points that I knew that really needed it, that I felt like were holding birth trauma. So for me, it was like my heart space, for sure, because just like the grief and the sadness. My womb space, just feeling like my womb space failed me in a way. And then my solar plexus area, which is like above your belly button, kind of like in between your heart and your belly button. That's your solar plexus area. It's a huge energy center. That is the seat of your confidence and your power. And that was where I had to do the most clearing and the most just like filling in with love and light, because I felt like my power was taken away in the first experience, and in the second experience, I felt powerless. But also, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, after my C-section, I had told my husband to go home, and I was in a room at night by myself with Coco, and my machine kept like beeping, and I kept calling the nurse, and they would come in and fix it, and then they would go. And I couldn't move because I had the C-section. I couldn't even get out of bed to do anything, and it just kept beeping, and then they started to ignore me. And I was so upset. And then Coco's like crying, and I need help like getting her out. It was just, that night was such a dark, dark night. And it's one of the times I felt the most powerless in my entire life, because I physically it was like I was paralyzed. Like I couldn't physically get out of bed yet. And yeah, like really, really feeling it right now, like in my solar plexus area as I'm saying this. So anyways, those are the areas that I really focused on with my energy healing, which, if you don't know, I do angelic energy healing. I work with the beautiful angels and archangels and call in rainbow light, which is like every ray of God's light to flow through my body, through your body. If you do a session with me, it's really incredible, and it's really amazing, which is one session is really, really potent. Just one session of energy healing can do to just clear everything out and also like refill you with love. So after I did this with Coco's birth, and also Kenzie's, but especially Coco's, it feels after like there was like this lifting of just this heaviness that was just, it was like the angels were just like, okay, we got you. And they just like carried off this boulder of heavy energy out of my body. I feel so much lighter. After almost every session that I did on myself, I would cry again, or I would cry during it, which is just another release. So yeah, that is how I move through all of my birth trauma, my postpartum trauma. I'm telling y'all, the missing piece is energy healing, and I feel very called to speak up about this because I moved through it in this way. And like I said with Coco, I was able to move through it in like 2 years, so much faster than my other 2 kids. I know mamas that are still dealing with this and they've got like 8, 9-year-olds. And I'm like, you've got to just schedule a session with me. I'm not saying it's the be all end all, because like I said, there's the physical piece, there's the mental, emotional piece, and then there's the energetic piece. But this is the missing link, in my opinion, for many, many women. And it's something that I'm really going to start focusing on more in my business. And I hope that more women do come to me with birth trauma. Like, I want to help them heal so badly because I know how dark it can be. And I know also what's on the other side. And I believe that, in fact, I know why I went through these experiences. Like with Hudson, I went through that postpartum trauma with him because that propelled me into realizing, okay, I'm meant to help mothers. And I had to become a postpartum doula as like one more piece. That wasn't my mission, so to speak. That wasn't what I was meant to do for life, but there was something there for me. So that propelled me into that. And then with Coco, her birth, I mean, that propelled me into falling in love with meditation and going deeper, learning energy healing. I learned 3 different modalities after her. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not just learning this for myself as I thought. I am meant to be an energy healer as well as part of my purpose, and create guided meditations for mothers as part of my purpose. And so if you are needing support, whether you want to schedule a session or if you just feel like, hey, I just need to share my story with someone, can I just email you my story? Please do. Please share it with me. Like I said, I just want to help mothers, and especially mothers who have been through difficult postpartum and birth experiences. I'm here for you. I see you because I am you, because I've done it. I've moved through it myself, and I can tell you brighter days are ahead. I've never been happier than I am in my life now, truly. And I'm 41, guys, so it's been a journey. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening. Let me know it resonated. And I am sending all of you mamas so much love today. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the High Vibe Soul podcast. Your support means the world to me. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with a loved one. Sign up for my newsletter and receive 2 free high vibe meditations straight to your inbox. And for more ways to work with me, click the links in the show notes. I would love to hear from you, so send me a message on my Instagram at the.highvibe.soul, and I'll see you next time.